If you're over 80 years old, or if you love someone who is, what I'm about to share could genuinely change the way you look at your own reflection. Because your skin, that incredible organ you've had your entire life, the one that held you together through childhood scraped knees, teenage sunburns, and decades of living, is doing something remarkable right now. And most people have absolutely no idea what's actually happening beneath the surface. I've been practicing dermatology for over 25 years, and I'll be honest with you, the conversations I have with my patients in their 80s are some of the most meaningful of my career. Not because their skin problems are necessarily more severe, but because so many of them come to me feeling confused, frustrated, or even ashamed about changes they don't understand. Changes that are completely natural. Changes that deserve compassion, not concealment. My name is Dr. Emily Hartwell, and I specialize in geriatric dermatology. That means I've dedicated my career to understanding exactly what happens to skin as we reach our 8th decade and beyond. And today, I want to pull back the curtain on 5 transformations that occur in virtually everyone's skin after 80. Some of these will surprise you. Some might even relieve you. But all of them will give you the knowledge you need to take better care of yourself or someone you love. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I really encourage you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another health tip designed specifically for you. And if you find this video helpful, please leave your questions and suggestions in the comments below. I read every single one, and your feedback helps me create content that truly serves our community. Now let's talk about what's really happening to your skin. The first transformation is something I call the Great Thinning, and it affects literally every single person who reaches their 80s. Your skin is becoming more delicate than it has ever been in your entire life, and this happens for reasons that go far deeper than just getting older. Let me explain what I mean. When you were young, your skin had this beautiful, robust structure. Think of it like a well-made mattress with multiple layers of support. You had a thick outer layer called the epidermis that acted like a protective shield. Beneath that, you had a substantial dermis filled with collagen and elastin fibers, essentially the springs and cushioning of your skin. And underneath all of that, you had a nice layer of subcutaneous fat that provided padding and insulation. By the time you reach 80, that mattress has changed dramatically. The epidermis has thinned by about 20 to 30%. The dermis has lost roughly half of its collagen, and that protective fat layer underneath? In many areas, it's significantly diminished or nearly gone altogether. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's the result of decades of gradual cellular changes, hormonal shifts, and the natural slowing of your skin's regenerative processes. The junction between your epidermis and dermis, what we call the dermal-epidermal junction, also flattens out with age. When you were young, this junction looked like interlocking fingers under the microscope, creating a strong bond between the layers. At 80, that junction is much flatter, which means the layers of your skin don't hold together as securely as they once did. I had a patient named Margaret Thompson, 83 years old, a retired librarian from Portland, Oregon. Margaret came to see me because she was devastated by bruises that kept appearing on her arms and hands. She said to me, "Dr. Hartwell, I wake up with new purple marks every morning and I don't even remember bumping into anything. My grandchildren are starting to think someone is hurting me." Margaret's hands were covered in purple and yellow marks in various stages of healing. Some were small as dimes, others spread across her entire forearm. She had started wearing long sleeves even in summer, making excuses not to hold her grandchildren, withdrawing from activities she had loved her entire life. Margaret was experiencing what we call senile purpura, though I prefer the term age-associated purpura because there's nothing shameful about it. Her skin had become so thin that even the gentlest pressure, leaning on a table, carrying groceries, a playful hug from her grandchildren, was enough to cause tiny blood vessels beneath the surface to break. When I showed Margaret photographs of the cellular changes happening in her skin, she actually started to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. For months, she had been hiding her arms under long sleeves, canceling visits with friends, convinced something was terribly wrong with her. Understanding that this was a completely natural process, one that happens to nearly everyone, lifted a weight she had been carrying for far too long. The solution for Margaret wasn't about reversing time. It was about adaptation and protection. We talked about wearing light protective sleeves, being more conscious of how she moved through her environment, and using rich moisturizers to support what skin integrity she still had. I also recommended she increase her dietary protein and consider vitamin C supplementation, both of which can support collagen maintenance. Within weeks, she was wearing short sleeves again. She told me she felt like herself for the first time in years. If you're still with me and finding this information valuable, take a moment to write a 1 in the comments. It helps me know I'm reaching the right people with the right message. The second transformation happening in skin after 80 is something most people never think about, and it has to do with your body's ability to sense the world around you. Your skin contains thousands upon thousands of specialized nerve endings called mechanoreceptors. These are the tiny sensors that let you feel pressure, temperature, texture, and vibration. They're what allow you to button a shirt, feel the warmth of a loved one's hand, or notice when you've stepped on something sharp. There are several types of these receptors, each designed for specific sensations. Meissner's corpuscles detect light touch. Pacinian corpuscles sense deep pressure and vibration. Merkel cells help with texture discrimination. And free nerve endings detect pain and temperature extremes. Here's what most people don't know. By age 80, you've lost approximately 40% of these sensory receptors. The remaining receptors often function less efficiently than they once did. Your skin is becoming gradually numb, and this numbness often goes completely unnoticed because it happens so slowly over decades. Most people don't wake up one day and notice they can't feel things. The change is so gradual that the brain adapts and adjusts, creating a new normal that feels entirely ordinary even though it represents a significant change. I remember a patient named William Chen, 86 years old, a former mechanical engineer from San Francisco. William was an incredibly sharp man, still doing crossword puzzles in pen and beating his son at chess. He came to see me not because of anything obvious, but because his wife had noticed something concerning. She said William had started getting small burns on his hands when cooking, and he didn't seem to feel them until hours later. He was also having trouble with tasks that required fine finger sensitivity, like fastening the small buttons on his dress shirts. When I examined William's hands, I found multiple small healing burns and some concerning calluses he had no idea were there. His sensation had diminished so gradually that he hadn't realized he could no longer accurately judge when something was too hot or when pressure had become damaging. A standardized sensory test confirmed that his 2-point discrimination, the ability to distinguish between two close points of contact, had decreased significantly. William asked me a question I'll never forget. He said, "Dr. Hartwell, if I can't trust my own skin to tell me when something's wrong, how am I supposed to protect myself?" It was such an important question, and the answer is vigilance and adaptation. We worked with William on establishing routines, visual inspections of his hands and feet every single day, lower water heater temperatures throughout his home, oven mitts that he wore automatically, every single time, not just when he thought something might be hot, kitchen timers to remind him to check food rather than testing it by touch, shirts with larger buttons or magnetic closures that didn't require fine finger sensitivity. We also talked about footwear. William had been walking around barefoot in his home, something he had done his entire life. But with decreased foot sensation, he wasn't noticing small objects he was stepping on or developing calluses in dangerous locations. We discussed the importance of supportive, well-fitting house shoes that would protect his feet without requiring him to feel every potential hazard. William's story illustrates something crucial. The loss of sensation in aging skin isn't just about feeling less. It's about losing one of your body's most important early warning systems. When you can't feel a developing blister, a cut, or a burn, Small problems can become serious ones before you ever know they exist. This is particularly important for anyone with diabetes or circulation problems, where decreased sensation combines with slower healing to create real risks. If you or someone you love is in their 80s, please make daily skin checks a non-negotiable part of the routine. Look at what you can no longer reliably feel. Now, the third transformation is one that causes more distress than almost any other, and yet it's one of the most poorly understood. I'm talking about the dramatic changes in how skin heals after 80. When you were 20 years old and you got a cut, your body launched an incredibly efficient repair process. Blood clotting factors rushed to the scene within seconds. Immune cells, particularly neutrophils and macrophages, cleared away debris and prevented infection. Fibroblasts, the cells that produce collagen, multiplied rapidly and began laying down new tissue. New blood vessels formed through a process called angiogenesis. Within days, sometimes even hours for minor wounds, you were well on your way to complete healing. At 80, that same repair process takes dramatically longer. We're talking about healing times that can be 3 to 4 times slower than they were in your youth. The inflammatory phase lasts longer but is less effective. Fibroblasts are fewer in number and less active. New blood vessel formation is compromised. Collagen production is decreased, and the collagen that is produced is often of lower quality. And it's not just about patience. Wounds that stay open longer are wounds that have more opportunity to become infected, more chance to develop complications. I treated a woman named Dorothy Williams, 81 years old, a retired elementary school teacher from Nashville, Tennessee. Dorothy was one of the most active 81-year-olds I've ever met. She volunteered at her church, tended a beautiful garden, and walked 2 miles every single morning. She had been active her entire life and saw no reason to stop just because of a number. One afternoon, she scraped her shin on a garden stake. Nothing dramatic, just a shallow wound about 2 inches long. She told me it barely bled, and at first it didn't even hurt that much. Dorothy did what she had always done with minor injuries. She cleaned it, put on a bandage, and expected it to heal within a week or 2. 3 weeks later, the wound looked almost exactly the same. 4 weeks later, it was actually getting bigger, not smaller. She tried different bandages, different ointments, even some home remedies a friend suggested. Nothing seemed to make any difference. By the time Dorothy came to see me, nearly 6 weeks after the initial injury, she was frightened and confused. The wound had become what we call a chronic wound, one that has stalled in the healing process and needs intervention to get it moving again. The edges had become rolled and thickened, a sign that epithelial cells were trying to migrate but getting stuck. There was some unhealthy tissue in the wound bed that needed to be carefully removed. The surrounding skin was inflamed and irritated from the various products Dorothy had been trying. Dorothy asked me, her voice shaking slightly, how a little scrape in my garden turned into this. What Dorothy didn't know, what most people don't know, is that aging skin has fundamentally altered wound healing capabilities. The blood supply to the skin decreases as we age, providing fewer nutrients and oxygen to healing tissue. The immune response becomes less efficient and more likely to produce chronic inflammation rather than constructive healing. The cells responsible for creating new tissue are fewer in number and work more slowly. Growth factors that orchestrate the healing process are produced in smaller quantities. Additionally, many medications commonly taken by people in their 80s can affect wound healing. Blood thinners, necessary for many heart conditions, can delay clotting. Certain blood pressure medications can affect circulation. Even some common pain relievers can interfere with the inflammatory processes that are actually necessary for proper wound healing. We got Dorothy's wound healing with specialized treatments, but more importantly, we had a long conversation about prevention, about wearing protective gardening clothes, including long pants and sturdy gloves, about treating every wound, no matter how minor it seems, with more aggressive care than she ever had to in the past, about watching wounds closely and seeking help early rather than assuming time alone would fix the problem. Dorothy told me something that really stayed with me. She said, "I've always been independent. Taking care of myself is who I am. Learning that my body can't do what it used to do is hard. But knowing why, understanding the science, that makes it something I can work with instead of fight against." If this is resonating with you, if these stories are helping you understand yourself or someone you care about, please consider liking this video. It really does help more people find this information when they need it most. The fourth transformation happening in skin after 80 is something that affects daily comfort and quality of life more than many people realize. I'm talking about the dramatic decrease in oil and sweat production that occurs as we age. Your skin has millions of tiny glands that produce two essential substances. Sebaceous glands produce oil, that natural moisturizer that keeps your skin supple and creates a protective barrier against the environment. This oil, called sebum, contains fatty acids, wax esters, and other compounds that keep your skin waterproof and protected. Sweat glands produce perspiration, which not only cools you, but also helps maintain the acid mantle of your skin, a slightly acidic environment that protects against bacterial and fungal infections. By age 80, sebaceous gland activity has typically dropped by about 60% compared to middle age. The glands themselves have often shrunk in size. Sweat gland function has declined as well, sometimes dramatically, both in the number of active glands and in the amount each gland produces. The result is skin that is fundamentally drier, more fragile, and more vulnerable than it has ever been. This dryness isn't evenly distributed across your body either. The legs and arms tend to be most severely affected, while the face may actually still produce reasonable amounts of oil for some people. This uneven drying can be confusing, leading people to use products that might work on one area but be completely wrong for another. I had a patient named Robert Johnson, 84 years old, a retired postal worker from Chicago. Robert came to see me in the middle of January, and his skin was in crisis. His legs were covered in what looked like cracked desert earth, deep fissures running through skin that was so dry it had essentially lost all elasticity. He was itching so severely that he had scratched himself raw in multiple places, creating wounds that were then struggling to heal because of all the factors we discussed earlier. Robert told me he had always been the type of man who didn't fuss over himself. A quick shower, some basic soap, get on with the day. That approach had worked fine for 80 years. But his skin had changed, and his routine hadn't changed with it. When I asked Robert about his bathing habits, I discovered he was taking long, hot showers every morning, sometimes 15 or 20 minutes underwater as hot as he could stand it. He was using a harsh antibacterial soap because he thought it would keep him cleaner. He was toweling off vigorously, rubbing his skin hard to get completely dry. Each of these habits, harmless or even beneficial for younger skin, was devastating for his 84-year-old epidermis. Hot water strips away what little natural oil remaining skin produces. It also increases transepidermal water loss, meaning moisture evaporates from the skin more rapidly after hot bathing. Harsh soaps destroy the protective barrier and alter the pH balance of the skin. Vigorous toweling damages the fragile surface and can create microscopic tears that further compromise the skin barrier. We made changes together. Shorter, lukewarm showers, no more than 5 to 10 minutes. Gentle, fragrance-free cleansers that wouldn't strip the skin. Patting dry instead of rubbing. And crucially, applying a rich, occlusive moisturizer within 3 minutes of bathing while the skin is still slightly damp to lock in whatever moisture it had absorbed. For particularly dry areas like his shins, we used an ointment-based product rather than a lotion, because ointments contain more oil and create a better barrier. Robert was skeptical at first. He said, "Dr. Hartwell, I've never been a lotion person and I'm not sure I want to start now." I told him I understood, but I asked him to try it for 2 weeks and see what happened. Within 2 weeks, the transformation was remarkable. The deep cracks began to heal. The itching subsided dramatically. Robert said he felt more comfortable in his own skin, literally, than he had in years. He told me, I didn't realize how much of my energy was going toward being uncomfortable until I wasn't uncomfortable anymore. Here's what I want everyone to understand. The dryness that develops in aging skin isn't just a cosmetic issue. It's not just about looking older. Severely dry skin cracks. Cracked skin becomes infected. Infections in elderly patients can become serious rapidly because the immune system is also less effective at fighting them off. Proper moisturization is preventive medicine, plain and simple. And there's another aspect to the decreased sweat production that people rarely think about. Your ability to regulate body temperature depends significantly on sweating. When sweat production decreases, you become more vulnerable to heat-related illness. If you're over 80 or if you care for someone who is, this is crucial knowledge during warm weather. The body simply cannot cool itself as effectively as it once could. This means being more careful about heat exposure, staying well hydrated, and knowing the signs of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Now we come to the fifth transformation, and in many ways, this is the one that brings everything together. After 80, your skin's ability to protect you from the sun is fundamentally compromised, and the accumulated sun exposure of your lifetime is still actively causing damage. Throughout your entire life, every minute you spent in the sun was contributing to a cumulative burden of ultraviolet damage. UV radiation, both UVA and UVB, penetrates the skin and causes direct damage to DNA and skin cells. It breaks down collagen and elastin fibers. It triggers inflammation. It causes mutations in the genes that control cell growth and division. When you were young, your skin had robust repair mechanisms. DNA repair enzymes could fix much of the damage that UV radiation causes. You had plenty of melanocytes, the cells that produce melanin pigment, to offer some protection. The thick, healthy structure of younger skin provided a meaningful physical barrier against UV penetration. At 80, all of those protective factors are diminished. The DNA repair mechanisms are slower and less effective, meaning more mutations persist and accumulate. Many melanocytes have been lost or have become dysfunctional, which is why skin tends to develop uneven pigmentation with age. The thinned, fragile skin offers less barrier protection against UV radiation. And here's the particularly challenging part. The damage you accumulated decades ago is still present and still capable of causing problems. I treated a gentleman named James Mitchell, 82 years old, a retired fishing boat captain from Savannah, Georgia. James had spent 50 years on the water, and his face and hands bore the evidence of that life lived under the sun. He had what we call photoaging, skin that looked decades older than his actual years, with deep wrinkles, areas of discoloration, numerous rough, scaly patches, and a leathery texture that spoke to years of UV exposure. Those rough patches are what concerned me most. Several of them were actinic keratoses, precancerous lesions caused by sun damage. They felt like sandpaper to the touch and were present on his face, scalp, ears, forearms, and the backs of his hands. James had been ignoring them for years, assuming they were just age spots, just part of getting old. He said to me, "Doctor Hartwell, I've had rough skin my whole life. It's just who I am." But when I biopsied one of the more concerning lesions, it came back as an early squamous cell carcinoma, a skin cancer that needed to be removed immediately. James was shocked. He had no idea that sun damage from his 30s and 40s could still be turning into cancer in his 80s. This is what I want everyone to understand. Sun damage has a very long memory. The UV exposure you received decades ago created mutations in your skin cells that can take 20, 30, even 40 years to develop into cancer. This is called the latency period, and it's why skin cancer rates are actually highest in people over 65. People in their 80s are at the highest risk of their lives for skin cancer, precisely because they've had the most time for accumulated damage to manifest. James and I spent a lot of time together over the following months. He needed several lesions removed. We treated many of his actinic keratoses with various methods to reduce his risk of further cancers. But more importantly, we talked about the fact that sun protection still matters at 80. staying out of direct sun during peak hours between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, wearing protective clothing including long sleeves and wide-brimmed hats, using sunscreen with at least SPF 30 on exposed areas. Yes, even at 80, because you can still accumulate new damage, and because protecting already damaged skin gives it the best chance to repair what it can. I also taught James how to do a monthly skin self-examination, checking his entire body for new or changing spots. I recommended he have his wife check his back and scalp, areas he couldn't easily see himself. Early detection of skin cancers dramatically improves outcomes, and self-examination is a crucial tool. James told his story to his children and grandchildren. He showed them his scars and his spots and told them, "Start protecting yourselves now. Don't wait until you're my age to take this seriously." That's perhaps the most important legacy of what he went through. So what do we do with all of this knowledge? What are the practical steps that can genuinely help? First, understand that these changes are natural. They are not signs of disease or failure. They are what happens to human skin that has been living and working for 8 decades or more. There is no shame in having thin skin, in healing slowly, in needing more moisturizer than you used to. These are simply realities to be acknowledged and worked with. Second, adapt your care routines to match your current skin, not the skin you had 20 or 30 years ago. If you're using the same products and habits you used in your 60s, they may no longer be serving you well. Consider gentler cleansers, richer moisturizers, lower water temperatures, more protective clothing. These aren't signs of giving up. They're signs of intelligent adaptation. Third, become your own best observer. Conduct regular visual examinations of your skin, especially in areas you can't feel as well as you used to. Look at your feet, your lower legs, your back. Use a mirror or ask someone you trust to help. Catch problems early when they're still small problems. Fourth, don't hesitate to seek professional care. A dermatologist who understands aging skin can be an invaluable ally. Skin changes that worry you deserve professional evaluation. Wounds that aren't healing need attention. New or changing spots should be examined. This isn't being overcautious. It's being appropriately vigilant. Fifth, protect whatever sun-vulnerable skin you have left. Stay in shade when possible during peak sun hours. Wear protective clothing, hats, and sunglasses. Use sunscreen on exposed areas. It's never too late for protection to make a difference. And finally, talk about these changes. With your doctor, with your family, with your friends who are going through similar experiences. So much of the distress that accompanies skin aging comes from isolation, from thinking you're the only one, from not understanding what's normal. When we share knowledge and normalize these conversations, we lift burdens that people have been carrying alone. Your skin at 80 tells the story of everything you've lived through, every sunburn and healing scar, every laugh line earned through years of joy, every protective response to winters and summers, stresses and recoveries. It has been your barrier against the world for 8 decades. It has held you together, literally, through everything life has brought. That skin deserves your attention, your care, and your respect. Not because aging is something to fight against, but because you, in whatever body you currently inhabit, deserve to feel comfortable and cared for. You deserve to understand what's happening to you. You deserve to have the tools and knowledge to take the best possible care of yourself. If anything I've shared today has been helpful, I hope you'll share this video with someone else who might benefit. Someone in their 80s who is confused by changes they're seeing. Someone caring for an aging parent. Someone who simply wants to understand what the future might hold. Knowledge truly is power, and this knowledge can make a real difference in quality of life. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Please remember that while I've shared general principles and stories, your skin is unique, and nothing replaces a personal evaluation by a healthcare provider who can examine you directly. If you have concerns about your skin, please reach out to a dermatologist or your primary care physician. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. I'll see you in the next video.